My beloved child, pause here for a moment. Do not rush past these words, because what you are about to hear was meant to find you at the exact moment your heart was strong enough to receive it. Something has been moving beneath the surface of your life, hidden behind silence, distance, unanswered questions, and emotions you could never fully explain. You have felt it in the stillness before sleep. You have sensed it when a familiar thought appeared without warning. You have wondered why one particular soul continues to return to your heart, even when logic tells you to let the feeling disappear. Today, heaven is drawing back the curtain. But the truth will not arrive in the way you expected. The person your soul recognizes is already married. Stay with me, because those words are not the conclusion. They are only the doorway to a story far more complicated, tender, and unexpected than anything you have imagined. This message is not being given to encourage interference, secrecy, betrayal, or the breaking of sacred commitments. It is being revealed so that you can understand why your spirit has carried a connection that seemed impossible, why certain emotions have refused to leave, and why you were never meant to lose yourself while waiting for an answer. There is more to this story. Much more. For a long time, you believed that if a connection was real, the path would be simple. You thought two souls would meet at the right moment, recognize each other without confusion, and move forward without barriers. You believed love would arrive like a sunrise, clear, warm, and impossible to misunderstand. But some connections do not begin in open fields. Some begin behind walls built long before the two souls ever meet. Some arrive when one person is still living inside a life created by fear, obligation, expectation, or choices made before they understood themselves. Some appear not to become immediate relationships, but to awaken truth. They reveal what has been sleeping. They bring hidden wounds to the surface. They force the heart to confront the distance between the life it is living and the life it secretly longs to live. That is what happened here. Your soulmate did not recognize you because they were searching for someone new. They recognized you because something within them had been silent for years, and your presence made it speak. It frightened them. You may never have seen the exact moment it happened, but heaven saw it. There was a second, small enough for everyone else to miss, when their entire inner world shifted. Perhaps it was the way you looked at them without asking them to perform. Perhaps it was the calm in your voice. Perhaps it was your kindness when no one was watching, or the sadness you carried with dignity. Perhaps it was simply the strange familiarity of being near you. Whatever the moment was, they felt something they had no language for. They did not immediately call it love. At first, they called it confusion. Then they called it curiosity. Then they tried to call it nothing. But the soul does not become silent merely because the mind refuses to listen. Your presence began following them into quiet places. It appeared during ordinary moments, while driving, washing dishes, sitting alone after everyone had gone to sleep. They remembered words you had spoken casually. They replayed expressions on your face. They wondered why conversations with you felt more honest than conversations they had been having for years. And then guilt entered. Not because you had done something wrong. Not because they intended to betray anyone. Guilt appeared because your existence made them aware of an emptiness they had spent a long time avoiding. This is where the story becomes deeper. Their marriage did not begin as a lie. There were once sincere hopes within it. There were promises made with real intentions. There may have been affection, loyalty, shared dreams, and moments of genuine tenderness. Do not reduce another person's life to a simple mistake, my child. Human hearts are rarely that easy to understand. A relationship can contain care and still become a place where two people slowly lose themselves. A promise can be made honestly and later become painful when the people who made it grow in different directions. Your soulmate entered that marriage believing it would become the home they needed. For a time, perhaps it was. But somewhere along the way, they stopped feeling seen. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. It happened in quiet increments. A conversation avoided here. A feeling dismissed there. A dream postponed. A truth swallowed to keep the peace. They became skilled at functioning. They smiled at the right moments. They carried responsibilities. They showed up where they were expected. From the outside, their life may have appeared settled. Inside, however, something was fading. They began to confuse endurance with peace. They began to believe that emotional loneliness was simply part of adulthood. They told themselves that wanting to be deeply understood was unrealistic. They buried their longing beneath duties and routine. They accepted the version of life they had built because changing it seemed too costly, too frightening, too disruptive. Then you appeared. You did not create the emptiness. You revealed it. That distinction matters. You were not sent to destroy a marriage. You were not placed in their path to become a secret escape. You were not asked by heaven to compete for someone's affection or wait in the shadows while they remain divided. You became a mirror. And when they looked into that mirror, they saw the person they had been before compromise taught them to become smaller. They saw their own tenderness. Their buried courage. Their unspoken dreams. They saw the possibility of being known without pretending. That is why their reaction to you may have seemed inconsistent. At times, they moved closer emotionally. At other times, they became distant without explanation. One moment, their eyes revealed warmth, the next, they built a wall. They may have appeared open, then suddenly guarded. They may have reached out and then disappeared. You wondered whether you had imagined everything. You did not imagine the shift. But you did not yet understand the battle. Every time they felt drawn toward you, they also heard the weight of their existing life. They thought of promises, responsibilities, family expectations, shared history, and the consequences of admitting that their heart had awakened somewhere they never expected. They feared hurting others. They feared becoming the villain in someone else's story. They feared that what they felt for you might be temporary, even though it continued growing in the silence. Most of all, they feared what the connection demanded from them. Because true soul recognition does not merely ask, "Whom do you love?" It asks, "Are you living truthfully?" That question became impossible for them to escape. Listen carefully now, because this is the part your heart has needed to hear. Their marriage is not the reason you are unworthy of love. Their silence is not proof that you were rejected. Their inability to choose clearly does not diminish the sacredness of what you felt. But their circumstances are also not permission for you to abandon yourself. Heaven has watched you struggle between hope and self-respect. You tried to be understanding. You told yourself that patience was a sign of faith. You wondered whether waiting quietly would prove the depth of your love. You sensed their pain and wanted to rescue them from it. Yet there were nights when your own soul grew tired. You questioned why a connection that felt so meaningful had to hurt so much. You asked why the person who seemed to understand your heart could not stand before you freely. You wondered whether the universe had made a cruel mistake. No mistake was made. But you misunderstood the purpose of the timing. You thought this connection arrived to give you an immediate union. It may have arrived first to give both of you an awakening. For them, the awakening was about truth. For you, it was about worth. They were being asked to confront the life they had been avoiding. You were being asked to stop measuring your value by someone else's readiness. This is why every attempt to force the story forward has failed. Whenever you tried to predict what would happen, confusion increased. Whenever you searched for proof in every message, glance, silence, or coincidence, your peace slipped farther away. You were trying to read the ending while both souls were still being transformed. The story could not move forward through pressure. It required honesty. And honesty has a cost. Your soulmate began experiencing cracks in the identity they had carefully maintained. They started noticing how often they said yes when they wanted to say no. They began recognizing how much of their life had been shaped by fear of disappointing people. They remembered dreams they had abandoned. They noticed the difference between being needed and being loved. These realizations did not make them feel free. At first, they made them feel lost. There were moments when they resented the connection with you because it disturbed the numbness that had once protected them. They may have wished they could return to the person they were before meeting you. They tried to convince themselves that distance would make everything normal again. So they became quiet. They avoided certain conversations. They distracted themselves with work, routine, social obligations, or constant activity. But the silence did not erase you. It made your presence louder. Not because you were constantly contacting them. Not because you were chasing. But because the emotional truth they associated with you had already entered their awareness. Once the soul remembers what authenticity feels like, pretending becomes exhausting. Something began changing inside their marriage. Not necessarily in visible conflict. The deepest changes often begin without raised voices. They began looking at their partner differently, not with hatred, but with painful clarity. They saw the ways both of them had been maintaining an arrangement while avoiding deeper truths. They noticed the conversations neither of them wanted to begin. They sensed that their partner, too, might have been lonely in ways never expressed. This is the story you never expected. The marriage may not be ending because of you. It may already have been changing long before you arrived. Your presence did not write the first chapter of their disconnection. You entered near the moment when they could no longer ignore what had been written. And there is another truth. The person they married is not simply an obstacle standing between two destined souls. They are a human being with their own wounds, fears, hopes, and spiritual lessons. Heaven does not celebrate another person's pain so that you can receive love. Divine alignment never requires cruelty. Anything truly meant for you must arrive through integrity, clarity, and respect, not deception. That is why the path has been delayed. Your soulmate has been standing at the edge of a decision, but the decision is not merely between two people. It is between two versions of themselves. One version remains in the familiar life, avoids conflict, fulfills expectations, and continues quietly disappearing. The other speaks truth, accepts consequences, takes responsibility, and chooses a life that matches the soul. You cannot make that choice for them. Your love cannot make it for them. Your suffering cannot make it for them. They must become brave without using you as an excuse. This is the standard heaven is placing over the connection. If they leave one chapter only because they are emotionally intoxicated by another, they may carry the same unhealed patterns forward. If they run toward you without facing what went wrong within themselves, the relationship you hoped would heal everything could eventually become burdened by guilt, fear, and unresolved grief. So the delay has been protection, not punishment. There are inner doors they must walk through alone. They must admit where they were dishonest with themselves. They must have conversations they have postponed. They must stop blaming circumstances for choices they continue making. They must learn that compassion does not require self-abandonment, and responsibility does not require living a lie. Meanwhile, you are being prepared in a different way. You are learning to love without chasing, to care without collapsing, to hold hope without turning hope into a prison. You are learning that a spiritual connection should not demand that you become invisible. It should not require endless secrecy, emotional crumbs, or promises without action. Your heart is sacred, and sacred things are not meant to survive on confusion. There was a time when you would have accepted almost anything just to remain connected to this person. A hidden message. A rare moment of vulnerability. A vague promise about the future. A sentence that kept you waiting for months. But you are not that version of yourself anymore. You are becoming someone who understands that love must eventually become clear. This transformation has not been easy. You have grieved possibilities no one else knew existed. You have carried a private ache while appearing strong. You have tried to release them, only to feel the connection rise again when you least expected it. At times, you judged yourself for caring. Do not judge your heart. It recognized something real. But a real connection and a ready relationship are not the same thing. This revelation is being placed before you now so that you can stop confusing spiritual intensity with immediate permission. Some souls recognize each other before their lives are prepared to meet. Some connections arrive as catalysts. Some become unions only after truth has cleared the path. Others complete their purpose by awakening both people and then guiding them in separate directions. You have wanted certainty about which kind of story this is. That certainty has not yet been given. But something has happened recently. Something your soulmate did not expect. A conversation took place inside their home. It began quietly, almost casually, but it uncovered a truth that had been avoided for a very long time. Their spouse said something that stopped them completely. It was not an accusation about you. Your name may never have been spoken. It was a confession. Their spouse admitted that they, too, had felt the marriage changing. They admitted they had noticed the emotional distance. They revealed that they had been pretending not to see it because the alternative felt terrifying. For one suspended moment, both of them sat inside the same truth. No performance. No blame. No escape. Your soulmate expected anger, but instead they heard exhaustion. They expected resistance, but they heard a sadness that mirrored their own. The person beside them was not unaware. They had been feeling the ending of something too, though neither of them knew what form that ending would take. That conversation opened a door. But it did not immediately solve anything. It made the situation more real. Your soulmate was forced to recognize that silence had not protected anyone. It had only delayed the pain. They realized that staying physically present while emotionally absent was not the kindness they had imagined it to be. And then their spouse asked a question. A simple question. A question that made your soulmate think of you before they could stop themselves. Do you remember the last time you felt fully alive? The room became still. They could not answer aloud. But inside, an image appeared. It was not an image of dramatic romance. It was not a fantasy of escape. It was a memory of a moment with you, perhaps brief, perhaps ordinary, when they felt seen, peaceful, and completely themselves. That memory frightened them because it revealed the truth too clearly. They looked away. Their spouse noticed. And in that silence, something unspoken passed between them. Not the full truth. Not yet. But enough. After the conversation ended, your soulmate went somewhere alone. They needed air. They needed distance from the walls that had held years of unspoken emotion. And for the first time, they allowed themselves to say within their heart what they had refused to admit. I cannot keep living divided. Those words marked a turning point. But do not assume what happened next. They did not immediately decide to leave. They did not rush to contact you. They did not make a reckless promise. They did something far more significant. They began writing. At first, it was only a few lines in a private notebook or an unsent message. Then the words kept coming. They wrote about the marriage. They wrote about guilt. They wrote about fear. They wrote about the version of themselves they had lost. And eventually, they wrote about you. Not your appearance. Not the fantasy of being with you. They wrote about what your presence awakened. They wrote that you made them remember honesty. They wrote that being near you showed them how emotionally absent they had become from their own life. They wrote that they feared losing you, but feared reaching for you before they had become someone capable of loving you with integrity. Read that again within your spirit. They are not only afraid that you will move on. They are afraid that if they come toward you too soon, they will bring chaos into the very connection they consider sacred. That fear has kept them silent longer than you understand. But silence is no longer sustainable. The page they wrote became a confession to themselves. And when they finished, they realized the next step could no longer be postponed. They decided to seek guidance. Not from someone who would simply tell them what they wanted to hear, but from someone who could challenge them to tell the truth. A counselor, a spiritual mentor, or a trusted elder entered the story. Your soulmate spoke carefully at first, leaving out your identity and minimizing the intensity of the connection. But the person listening saw through the guarded language. They asked, "Are you trying to save your marriage, or are you trying to avoid becoming responsible for its ending?" The question struck deeply. Your soulmate had no immediate answer. Because part of them still wanted to believe that keeping everything unchanged was the most compassionate choice. Yet another part knew that continuing without honesty was slowly hurting everyone involved. Then the guide asked another question. "Is there someone else?" Your soulmate's breathing changed. They could have lied. For a few seconds, they almost did. But something within them refused. They answered, "There is someone who reminded me who I am." Not someone they had claimed. Not someone they had promised a future. Someone who reminded them who they were. That is how they described you. The guide did not romanticize it. They did not tell your soulmate to follow emotion blindly. They said something your soulmate did not expect. Then do not use that person as your exit. Become honest enough to leave or stay without making them carry the weight of your decision. Those words changed the direction of everything. Your soulmate understood that they could not ask you to wait while they remained undecided. They could not draw emotional comfort from you while avoiding the consequences of truth. They could not call the connection sacred while treating your heart like a hidden room they visited only when lonely. For the first time, they began to understand what loving you might actually require. Not grand declarations. Not secret intensity. Courage. Restraint. Accountability. A willingness to lose the fantasy in order to protect the possibility of something real. That is why their next action may confuse you. They may become more distant before they become clear. They may stop sending mixed signals. They may pull their emotions inward. You may interpret this as rejection, but it could be the first time they are refusing to use you as a refuge while their life remains unresolved. Do not chase the silence. Let it reveal character. If they are truly becoming ready, their growth will eventually produce action. Not hints. Not spiritual language without substance. Not promises made during emotional moments. Real action. Until then, your assignment is not to decode every sign. Your assignment is to continue living. You have delayed parts of your happiness because you feared moving forward would mean betraying the connection. You believed that opening your life to joy might close the door on destiny. But what is truly meant for you will not require you to remain frozen. Your soulmate must find courage. You must reclaim movement. Build the life you would be proud to share with someone, but do not build it around someone who has not arrived. Return to your gifts. Restore your energy. Speak with people who make you feel present. Create beauty. Laugh without guilt. Let your days become more than waiting rooms. This does not erase love. It purifies it. Because love that is meant to last cannot be founded on one person pausing their life while the other avoids a decision. There is a moment approaching when the truth will become impossible to hide. Your soulmate spouse already senses that something deeper is changing. The counselor or guide has placed responsibility back into their hands. The private confession they wrote continues to call them toward honesty. And now, another event has occurred. A letter has been found. Not the letter about you. A different letter. One written years ago, before the marriage began. Your soulmate discovered it among old belongings while searching for something ordinary. The handwriting was their own. It was addressed to their future self. They had forgotten it existed. In that letter, a younger version of them described the life they hoped to live. They wrote about courage, truth, spiritual connection, and the desire to build a relationship where both people could remain fully themselves. They promised never to remain in a life solely because they were afraid to begin again. When your soulmate read those words, they broke down. Not because the letter told them to leave. Because it revealed how far they had drifted from their own soul. At the bottom of the page, there was one final sentence. A sentence that connected the past to the present in a way no one could have planned. They had written, "If I ever meet someone who makes me remember this version of myself, I pray I will have the courage not to run from the truth." Your soulmate read that sentence again and again. Then they thought of you. But what happened after that is the part heaven has not yet fully revealed. Because someone else entered the room. Someone saw the letter in their hands. Someone asked why they were crying. And for the first time, your soulmate looked up without preparing a safe answer. Their lips parted. The truth was finally ready to cross the distance between their hidden heart and the life they had built. But the first name they spoke was not yours.